20 million in career sales and 300 plus transactions sold. In today's first episode, we have Michael Kaplan, founder, CEO of REKAP Group. We talk everything from learning, renting, and buying real estate in your 20s to the agents in the industry that make it and fail. We also touch on how REKAP Group has been so successful in leveraging their own creative and social marketing strategy. We also talk about how we just got off the largest election in US history and how that may affect the rates in the current market going into the new year. We look at what individuals should be doing in 2025 to stay ahead of the curve. And just all in all, it was a great episode. So super excited to bring you guys this first one. And without further ado, let's hop right into it. We're joined today by Michael Kaplan, founder, CEO of REKAP Group.
Yep.
Over 20 million in career sales so far.
Yeah. That's combining all of our team's track record over these last few years. I've obviously been in the business now for going on 5 years, which is crazy to think that I'm getting up to that point. But yeah. So
300 plus transactions.
Yeah.
24 years old in the game.
Yeah. We've done a lot in a relatively short amount of time. So
awesome.
It's been a good experience and got to meet some cool people through it, obviously, like yourself, and more to come from that. So
awesome. Well, we're going to get into all that. We're going to peel the story back, but I guess we could start with that, right? Like, who is Michael Kaplan? How did this come to be? How did REKAP Group come to be? Take us back a few years and talk us through that.
Yeah. So I'm sure some of the people listening might have already heard this story, but for those who have not, I got into the business at 20 years old. I'm now 24 going on 25. So I was studying at DePaul University here in Chicago. I was getting my degree with a concentration in real estate, business administration. Obviously COVID hit. I was already studying to get my real estate license, and I had to make the pretty tough decision coming from an area in the north suburbs of Chicago, from Vernon Hills, going to a school that everybody goes to 4-year university. If you don't graduate with a 4-year degree after that, it's kind of like, it's very taboo to even talk about something like that. So I had to make that tough decision to say, hey, I'm not going to continue my college degree, continuing to pursue that. And I'm going to take this on full time and figure out how to do it come hell or high water. I didn't have any real estate experience. No family in the business, no real connections, but I knew it was where my heart was taking me. I don't really know exactly why. I think I could maybe point to it that in high school, I had an idea of that was always interesting to me. And yeah, from there on out, we just, I obviously started solo. So just kind of had to learn through the school of hard knocks, and made a lot of mistakes, continue to make a lot of mistakes, but that is the ultimate sign of growth, I think.
Right. So many individuals, especially within our generation, have so much pressure on them in terms of what do you want to do, figuring that out through college.
Right.
And how did that conversation with your parents where you like set them down? You're like, hey, I don't think this is going to be for me. The investment was, I appreciate it, but I think I need to go a different route here.
Right.
What was that inflection point?
Yeah. So kind of rewinding the tapes back to after me graduating high school, I was already kind of thinking like, do I really want to go to college? I'd always been an entrepreneurial, like, mindset type person. Watched my dad grow businesses my entire life. And I knew that path is what I wanted to go down eventually. And I think I got a little bit nervous. I think I probably fell into the pressure, and I don't regret it at all because I met some of the best people through my 2 years at DePaul. I met some lifelong friends and made some great connections there. But it got to the point where I think COVID played a big role in it with classes going online. I think I can speak to a lot of people's sentiment on that right. When you're paying that kind of money, and it's not like the tuition got any cheaper. Tuition was the same price, and you're sitting doing Zoom University, and I just didn't feel like I was getting the value out of it that I would have been getting had I been in person and able to forge those connections and build those relationships. So thankfully, my parents were very supportive of me. I always say that my parents probably have more faith in me sometimes than I have in myself. So I'm always really appreciative and grateful of that. And I understand that not everybody's necessarily in that, doesn't have that opportunity afforded to them.
Right.
But I do think that there is a little bit of a cultural and societal shift where people are starting to, I don't want to say second guess, but be a little bit more open to other opportunities that aren't necessarily traditional 4-year college degree, get that piece of paper, get your corporate 9 to 5, work
Right.
that American dream job to retire at 60 and ride off into the sunset. I think it's a little bit of a shift we're seeing right now.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I could definitely agree and attest to that. What was, and this could have been pre or post that inflection point in college, was there something that attracted you to the real estate market, to the industry? Is there one thing that kind of you come back to and you're like, yep, this is, I knew I wanted to do this?
Yeah. Well, so obviously I had like I spoke to before, my dad, watching him grow business. He's more in the hospitality hotel industry, but he'd always had an interest in real estate and never learned it. And everybody that I knew, and this may come off one way or the other, however you want to interpret it, but everybody that I knew that had rich parents, they were all somehow, some way in real estate. I'm like, something's there. I don't understand how. I don't understand anything about it, but like there's people making a lot of money doing this. So I got to figure out how to do it. And obviously to get into real estate, you need connections and you need some knowledge about it and you need some money. So being a real estate broker was my way to actively get involved in the industry, build those relationships, build that network to eventually and continue to fund my long-term play, which is real estate investing and buying and holding, those type of assets.
I want to talk about that a little later as well, because I know you just got your hands on your first property.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
To peel it back a step, or again, a little bit more, I know off camera here, we were talking about, the industry is so saturated. It's so competitive. For someone like you that's so driven, that's so disciplined, I'm sure that's not something that, is really coming across your mind, right? Your tunnel vision, you're focused on your goals and your vision, what you want to do.
Very.
I want to talk a little bit more about like what makes a great agent, what makes someone in the industry who's going to make it versus not. Because I feel like, especially right now, I mean, you for sure, but I could list off 100 people in their mid 20s that are quote unquote real estate agents, whether it's on the residential, commercial, industrial side.
Right.
What are some of those like super valuable qualities that are, allowing people to make it in this field?
Yeah. Well, I think what I always looked at is that there are some telltale signs of top performers in every industry that are kind of across the board true. You spoke to about it, discipline, kind of having those type of qualities that you're able to be a self-starter and pick yourself up by the bootstraps when things are going tough, because especially those first few years, they will be. But I think for a lot of it is, it just comes down to, are you getting into the industry for the right reasons? I think I've spoken to a lot of people who approach me that are younger, thinking about getting into the industry or do get into the industry. And my business, which is, I think, probably similar to any other business, has an extremely high turnover rate. I think 87% of real estate brokers are out of the business within their first 5 years.
Right.
Most do not make it even out of their first year. And I think it's just because the expectations are tainted, because especially through social media and through now mass media, through shows like Selling Sunset, through things like that, people have this idea in their head that we wake up, we put on cool outfits, we go to brunch and we make $1 million. And it's like, well, for 3 years, I mean, you got to be comfortable for those first 3 years. I'm not saying you won't make any money, but you got to be comfortable with the fact that you might not, essentially, because it's a business. You have to run it and treat it like a business. And most businesses aren't profitable for 3 years. So having that mindset and going into it with the proper expectations, I think helps alleviate a lot of that, that burden, and also puts you in a position to succeed. But when you go into it thinking, well, I'm getting into real estate because I want to make my own schedule. That's the best when people say that. I'm sure in any entrepreneur, it's kind of that way. It's like, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to make my own schedule. It's like, yeah, good luck with that.
Work your own hours. Right?
Yeah, work your own hours. I'm sure you can attest to that on your side. It's like, that's really, really, really far from the truth. So, yeah.
What would you say are a couple of cheat codes for those individuals, a few that are at a young age that kind of break free from that status quo, that are kind of doing it, at your level? And I want to talk about this a little bit because I feel like this may, you may include this in your answer, but what's the importance of having someone or a brokerage like Jameson Sotheby's back your group and what you're doing? Right. What did that process look like when you were looking to join a brokerage, and how do they kind of match up against each other? Because there's a lot of big players in the game. So I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious to that as well.
Yeah. I think I think the brokerage is super important because it gives you a lot of resources at your disposal, especially when you're starting out, to be like, hey, I may not know everything. I may not know pretty much anything. But when you come work with me, you're not just working with me. I have an array of professionals behind me that are able to help. And if I don't know something, I can get the answer in one call or one text away. Obviously now starting my own team and having my own team behind me, that's even more of a reason to come work with people like us, because I have the support through our brokerage. Right. I have the support through my team, and then obviously all the way up to the top with me. But I also think sometimes people fall into the trap of sometimes overvaluing what they get so in this analysis paralysis of what brokerage should I be with? Who should I be with? What's going to look good? It's like, you're in real estate, you're your business, right? You are your own business, and we're not paid salaries. We're 100% commission based. So just as much as when you're going and interviewing with other brokerages, they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The more money you make, the more money they make, and vice versa. So I always encourage people, it's not the traditional job interviewing process where you have the different salaries and there's 100 people interviewing for the one spot. It's like, no, they want you because that's part of their business model.
They almost want you more than you want to be there in some cases.
And so you need to be understanding of that, but not to the level of thinking, you're this brand new agent going to come walk in and steamroll, because I can promise you there's some really, really solid brokerages that aren't going to take on brand new people right off the start. And kind of go through that whole process.
For sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you feel like the brokerage has been able to do for REKAP to particularly excel you guys?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the accolade. I know you guys got a recent accolade, one of the top teams out of how many, 20, 30 teams?
Yeah, we have a bunch. I don't even know the exact amount of teams. We were on, on the list of our top teams in the brokerage. We got our Platinum Sales Award last year with the brokerage. I won Rookie of the Year a couple years ago when I entered the brokerage. So we've kind of built up a really solid reputation with a really esteemed brokerage in the area, internationally recognized as a top brokerage, but specifically in the Chicagoland area. And I think the biggest advantage that we have is, since we're the youngest team in Chicago. We are the youngest real estate brokerage team in Chicago, period. And I'm proud of that. And I wear it's right in the, front and center in our Instagram profile. I'm proud of that fact. But what's nice with working with a long-standing, great track record company like Jamison Sotheby's International Realty is that anybody that may have a little hesitation, being like, hey, these young kids, I don't know if I trust them to be handling, multi-million-dollar transactions. We can defer to, hey, yeah, we are a team of young kids. I do believe that we are really, really good at what we do, and we take the utmost pride in all of our work. But even if that's not enough, we have a whole brokerage and support team behind us with one of the best brokerages in the world that's there as well. So I think for some of the older clientele, it makes a little bit more of a difference. But I think for the younger clientele, a lot of them are, and even with the older clientele, they're coming to work because they're coming to work with you.
Yeah, 100%. You've mentioned your team dynamic at REKAP a couple times. I know the importance of having the correct team backing you and what you're doing on a daily basis is extremely, important to your day to day. What are some of the attributes of the current team members you have that have made them successful within REKAP? And then, how does Michael know, okay, it's time, we want to expand this team, across different markets. We want to have 10 agents at the REKAP group. What does that threshold look like? Yeah.
So I think when I first started, I never really intended of having a team. I always thought it was going to be Michael Kaplan. REKAP was not even in the thought at that point. But then you get to a point where your business is growing, and you're starting to turn away business, and that's the last thing I would ever want to do. So to me, that's always the key moment where it's if I'm having to turn away business, something needs to change. Right. And so once I was having to turn away business, that's when we brought on Gordy. That's when we brought on Sasha. Kind of at the same time, because we were doing some pretty large scale projects at the time, some really large scale lease ups that we were doing up in the north side of Chicago. And it was really kind of all came together at once. But I think that for me, and I think a lot of business owners, probably including yourself, I don't want to speak for you, but can relate to this, is it's very hard to relinquish that power because you spent so much of your internal energy and your blood and sweat and tears. And for me, it's been my entire adult life has been building this, that I can't afford to have people that are representing the brand that aren't in line with what I would see as expected. So we have very clear expectations for our people, and that goes not even from the work side of things, but beyond that. Like, how are you how do you behave outside of work? And a lot of those conversations don't even need to be had, because I won't even entertain the conversation of bringing on somebody onto my team that I can already sense that they're not going to be a good fit to represent what I'm trying to build. So I think that's a big thing. And two is just being comfortable relinquishing that power. I think nobody's ever going to care about your business as much as you do. And that's just the nature of the beast. That's something that you have to kind of come to terms with. But if you can find, and I don't know who it was that told me this, but if you can find somebody to do the task 80% is good, then you found a good, team member, a good employee. And it's when it's below that threshold that it may be a little bit of a challenge, or you may have to let them go.
Absolutely. I wanted to kind of maybe teeter this topic. We're obviously coming off a very massive presidential election. So many individuals, especially within our age range, are kind of troubling the decision of rent versus buy versus rent, commuting to work in the city, staying in the suburbs. Obviously, I'm currently going through that a bit. Yeah. Two parts to this, because I want to give people some value and some information and knowledge here. What makes up a good time or good situation for someone to buy versus rent?
Yeah.
And then I want to talk a little bit about, you can use my situation for an example, but what the current state of the market is, where do you think it's going, and how you feel like that's going to play out over the next few months here.
Yeah. So to your first question there, when is it a good time to buy or versus rent? It's different for everybody. I know that's probably not the answer that anybody wants to hear, but you have to buy when you're ready. That's period, end of story. The interest rate's going to go up. The interest rate's going to go down. Prices hopefully are going to continue to go up, but they may peak down and jump down a little. If you try and time the market, you're never going to buy anything. I cannot tell you how many clients I worked with in 2021, 2022, 2020, when interest rates were dirt. I mean, we're never going to see interest rates that low again, right? And we're saying, this is insane. People are bidding 40, 50, 60,000 over asking price. The houses are gone before we even see them. I'm not doing it because prices are going to come down. Well, then they waited and waited and waited, and interest rates went up and prices continue to go up. So then they just completely priced themselves out of the market. So instead of buying, a $400,000 house and paying, it was listed for 400 and they could have paid 450 at a 3% interest rate. That's now listed for 475. And they got it, for 465 at a 7%? Yeah. And you really feel like you won, right? Because people look at the number and they're like, well, it's the sticker price. It doesn't matter. The purchase price is the purchase price, but you're buying a monthly payment, right? So find out what your monthly payment is that you're comfortable spending and reverse engineer from there. And if the interest rates could be 50%, but if it fits within that criteria of what you're comfortable to spend, then you're golden. And if it doesn't, then you're not. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I tell people is it's you can't get caught up in a lot of the mumbo jumbo craziness. Noise. And it is a lot of noise.
That leads me to my next point. There is so much noise on social media and what you're doing. There's so many opinions, so much fake news, so much fake misinformation. How do individuals or average buyers and average consumers kind of, alleviate and divide, okay, this is real versus fake? What is some stuff they could look out for? Well,
I think you have to get with a real estate professional that you trust. And it doesn't have to be me. It has to be somebody, regardless of who you use, it has to be somebody that you trust. You should have like
Someone
everything
you're comfortable with a good track record.
Exactly. And I think that we as an industry, you have to have your Rolodex of, as you become an adult, of your accountant that you go to for questions like that. If you have an attorney, if you have, your doctors, all this Rolodex of professionals, and one of those professionals should be a real estate professional, because then you don't have to sit there and listen to God bless him, but your uncle, Tony, who hasn't, he bought his house in 1990s, telling you about how the real estate market's going to crash. It's like, well, should you really be taking your information from that? I don't know. That's for you to decide. I would say probably not. Like, you're better off going to somebody who is actively in the market, and not somebody also who's just a real estate person. Because somebody who's investing in real estate, somebody who's a real estate investor in office property in Miami is in real estate just as much as the real estate broker who sells to first-time home buyer condos in Chicago is.
Yep.
And they're going to have two wildly different outlooks on the market, right? What does the market even mean? So you have to have that specific person you can go to for those specific questions. That is an industry professional in what you're trying to do. And for us, that is, Chicagoland residential and investment multifamily sales.
Yeah. What's the main differentiators between buying in the city versus buying in the suburbs?
Yeah.
What are people kind of missing the boat on when it comes to that? Because I know there's a very large list of differences, in my opinion, from what I've been told growing up and what people are used to,
right?
Versus something that you might incur that is going to impact your process and decision when wanting to buy in the city.
Well, I'll tell you this: buying at the end of the day, buying your primary residence that you're going to live in, you have to throw out the mentality that this is like, it should be looked at from an investment lens. But I can tell you, and I'm in the business of selling real estate. So when you buy and you sell, I'm making money on that. And I am telling you that your best investment with that money is not going to be in that house. It's not. So you have to throw that out the window of being like, is this the absolute max ROI on my money? It's not going to be, period. End of story. But you have to look at it as, am I better off putting my money in this than renting? Because you got to live somewhere. So you're doing one of the two. If you can live at home, great. I'm a big proponent of that. I know we've had a lot of conversations going back and forth about that, but I'm the biggest proponent. If your parents are willing to and you can deal with that situation, live at home as long as you can, that it's, you're comfortable doing. But most people, you're either buying or renting. So you have to just be comparing those two options, not is this the absolute best investment of my life? And then going back to what you're saying about city versus suburbs, I think a lot of it has to do with, in the city, it's super dense. You have a lot of condos. You're dealing with HOA fees. You have very high taxes in a lot of these areas. There are high taxes in the suburbs too, don't get me wrong, especially in certain districts, school districts, and counties and whatnot. But that's a big difference. The space that you're getting, right? Like you're going to be probably getting less space in the city. I think in terms of from an investment perspective, I don't even think it's worth necessarily saying oh, should I be buying my house in the city versus the suburbs, from a pure investment perspective? Because by the end of the day, when you buy the house, you live in it, you have to be looking at it, especially if it's a long-term purchase, which it should be if you're going to be buying it. How is this going to function for my everyday life? How is this place going to serve me for my lifestyle? How is this potentially raising a family in it? Is it in a good school district? Is it not? And all of those things have a undertone potentially of that monetary investment, but a lot of it is just a personal lifestyle decision.
Right.
And I think that's where people sometimes miss the boat on it, because they're so caught up in the numbers, which you should be, because this is probably going to be the biggest financial decision you're going to make in your life. But with that being said, you're going to have to live somewhere. So you just have to be cognizant of that and kind of making sure it's a better decision than the alternative.
Yeah. I know for me, it's been very much so spoken around the idea of a lifestyle decision, but it ultimately comes down to what you do for work,
right? Where
your social surrounding is, and things of that nature. I feel like people miss that, can get very overwhelmed by the process. But back to what you were touching on too, I think it's really important for individuals to kind of understand all the upfront costs, all the upfront news when it comes to making these investments. But I want to segue a little bit. The whole preface for the show and wanting to have you on, you're obviously someone that is extremely diligent and consistent with what REKAP Group is doing.
Yeah.
And even on a personal level for your personal brand, in terms of your social media presence. Right. How are our worlds colliding in a way? I guess my first question with that is like, how much has the social media, the content game impacted yourself and REKAP Group? And then what's that driving force? What is the aspect that's allowing you to continue being so consistent? Because that's where a lot of people fall off, which I want to touch on. But
yeah, so anybody who's listening to this, if you're in business, if you're a business owner, could tell you anytime I go out in any social events, which I make it a point to do on a regular basis, 95% of the time, the first thing that people bring up to me is, I love your clips on social media, or I'm seeing your clips on social media. Even if they're lying. Honestly, even if they don't like it, I'm sure a lot of them don't. They're probably sick of seeing my face and hearing me talk. That's totally fine. But at the end of the day, they're seeing me, they're seeing my face, and they're seeing me talk about real estate. So subconsciously, it's getting programmed in their mind that this ugly mug right here is helping people buy and sell real estate. So the odds are when they decide to go and buy and sell real estate, they're going to be coming over to me and not to the person who has no social media presence at all. So that's number one. Number two, I think sorry, I'm going to fix my mic here a little bit, but I think where people sometimes miss the boat on the social media side of things is that they think it's maybe going to be like they look at it as a way to, and it is a good way to maybe garner new business. I don't disagree with that, but it's equally as important as a way to stay in front of the people who already know you, like you, and trust you. Right? Your sphere of people that are already following you anyways, that now can see you not just posting, cool pictures on the beach, your six pack, your, cruise that you're going on with your family. Right. They're now seeing you as an expert in your field or whatever you're trying to portray through your social media branding.
For sure. I think you guys have done such a great job of being very diverse with including the whole team, right? Including Gordy, including Sasha, having the REKAP room and the show that you guys are doing, being kind of multi-dimensional in that world, because it does get very mundane. It does get stale. The ideation process for some individuals is, I think, where they fall off. Yeah. That's what I wanted to touch on next. How does the REKAP group go about ideating these topics? I know so much of it is probably a natural flow into what your guys' day-to-day is, but how do you guys stay fresh? How do you guys stay excited about the content aspect of REKAP? Yeah,
I think for us, the biggest thing is that and there's so many real estate brokers on social media that all have their own, niches and how they kind of position themselves. I think for us, the approach that I've always been interested in taking and have made it at the forefront of everything that we do is we need to be letting our personalities and our authenticity shine through, right? It's great to showcase the $1 million listings that you have. It's great to go tour the coolest apartment buildings in Chicago and what $3,500 can get you at, some South Loop apartment. That's great. And it's probably, for a lot of people that I know, it's a great way to gain new business. But our business model is less transactional. It's more relationship based, right? So it's a lot more, who is Michael Kaplan? Like behind all of this, like who is the person behind that? Who is Sasha Rajko? Who is Gordy Baba? Like allowing our personalities to shine through. And that way, like I can say pretty confidently, I've never really had a cold lead. Like every deal that we've closed is a warm lead. And I'm proud of that because anytime somebody comes to us, they've already seen our social media somehow, and social media is the new business card. Social media, like maybe
it's the resume.
It is. 20 years ago, somebody tells you, I have a great real estate broker. 10, 15 years ago, you look them up on Google. Now you're looking them up on Instagram. So somebody who looks at, Michael Kaplan or the REKAP group, they're just scrolling and can see all the things that we're posting. They could see me doing, some funny stuff, whatever, a little bit more relatable. And they feel like when they come to talk to me, that I feel like that barrier, that guard is already lowered to where we can really start to forge that relationship compared to maybe somebody else who doesn't have that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, all your clients are individuals that you either have had or want to have a relationship with.
Yep.
Right. That's honestly why we're sitting together. You said something super important about trust. At the end of the day, what you're doing repetitively with the social media aspect of your business is fostering credibility, is gaining the trust of your consumers.
Yep.
And is kind of essentially breaking down that initial layer that you might have to do within a normal sales process.
Right.
It's amazing. I mean, I enjoy watching what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
I obviously relate to it a lot. But people fall off. People are not as consistent. Talk about maybe a couple of your, I wouldn't call them competitors, not competition.
Yeah.
What are some other individuals in your field doing on social media that stand out to you? There's obviously these massive groups and real estate teams in Chicago.
Right.
There's obviously all of the shows on Netflix and whatnot that are supporting kind of the social media ideation or ideology of what real estate is today. But who are some of the people that are doing things right? Who are some of the people that are kind of faking it and they really are just showing things on social media but don't have the transactions to support it?
Yeah. I think without getting name dropping specific people, I think that the people that are doing it right are the ones that are using social media as a way to actively like what is your end goal with it? Like going into it with what are you trying to do with it? Are you just trying to, and at the start, it may be just throwing SH at a wall and seeing what sticks. Cause I could tell you for a while that was me. And I think sometimes people don't ever start because they're like, well, they feel so nervous to even make that first step. But you need to have an idea of where you want to take it. And that develops a little bit over time. And like you said, with consistency, if you're not going to stay consistent with it, don't even bother. Because if you're going to do it for a week and think anything's going to come out of it, you're crazy. If you think even doing it for a month, you need to give it a significant amount of time to actually see the results from it. There are some people on Instagram that I really like. I like all the apartment tour people. There's a guy that I know, Jacob Friedman, who does a really good job of going around showing different apartment tours throughout Chicago. There's really a lot of different good social. Carrie McCormick does a really good job over at Properties, kind of in that luxury side of real estate. Sure. Kevin Rossio does a really good job, and he's one of my mentors, and he does a really good job of kind of like what I try and do with that personal side of things. It's very relatable stuff. It's not super, super, super like unbelievably professionally done, yet it comes off so authentic. And then when you meet him, you're like, oh, like I feel like I've known this guy for my whole life, and that's really something that I am trying to get through to people through our social media presence. Is it's like, oh, this is like somebody I could go chop it up with at the bar, even though I don't drink, but non-alcoholic. I'll get a mocktail.
It's that same guy, right? The expectation is set and then it's met in person.
Correct.
You're not meeting somebody different off screen. But to that point as well, it's never been easier for individuals and for viewers to feel emotion through a screen almost, right?
1,000%.
You obviously have a second or two to, gather that first impression, but it's never been easier for someone to make an opinion or feel something off of a video you're putting out.
Yep.
One question on that too, what would you say to the individuals that may feel a bit of the imposter syndrome, right? We're obviously two guys in our mid-20s trying to excel and be the best within our respective fields, but by no means are we experts. We're learning every single day. Right. It's not the most comfortable thing to hop in front of a camera, whether it's an iPhone or a commercial grade production piece, right? So what would you say to the people that might feel like they're kind of leaning towards that imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
And how would you advise them to kind of get over that hump or that, give them that leap?
Well, first acknowledging that it's natural. It's totally normal. I think that anybody who says that they don't feel that is not human, especially when you're young in positions that we are. My peers are people that are running, the people that are running real estate teams are 10, 15, 20 years my senior, maybe even more. And then there's me. And it's very easy to fall into that mindset, and it happens on a very regular basis even still, no matter how hard I will try and combat it and have done things to take steps in that direction. It's always in the back of your mind. What do I really know in comparison to these guys? They've been doing it so much longer. But I think what you have to realize is that success isn't by accident. The way people view you isn't by accident. the respect that you have, the respect that I have is earned. It's not given. And understanding and being really grateful for it, but also feeling like, yeah, like I did, this is something I deserve. And I, even if you are wherever you are in your career, I mean, there's people that are much older that have tons of experience that are have very difficult times getting in front of the camera. And there's people that are a lot younger that have no problem.
Right.
But I think it's like anything. It's like you have to do it at the start. My first videos were horrendous. I look back, they're not even on my Instagram anymore. Maybe one day I'll make a compilation of them, but they were horrendous. Like they were terrible. The quality was terrible. I wasn't comfortable in front of them. It was just very, very unnatural. But like anything, the first time you go to the gym, you're not benching 500 pounds. Like you have to start somewhere and you build that muscle over time. And then all of a sudden, after doing it, like we said about consistency, you stay consistent with it for a long enough time. All of a sudden that imposter syndrome, it diminishes and the confidence replaces it.
For sure. Yeah, I could totally attest to that. I relate to that heavily. Another question here, kind of in the advertising marketing sphere, where do you feel like real estate agents and brokerages might be missing the boat when it comes to holistic advertising and marketing, right? You have social media as one bucket, but like we talked about, that's great for brand building. That's great for the long-term aspect of what you're doing. But in terms of talking like conversion, obviously everybody would love for everything to be inbound, but I'm sure there's a lot of individuals in your world that are really focused on outbound sales and leads as well. What are people doing in real estate right now to stay on top of advertising and marketing?
Yeah.
Or where do you think people fall short?
Yeah, I think, social media is obviously the hot one right now. I think that there's a lot of people that are interested in it, but don't necessarily do it long enough or don't do it properly. The younger agents do it a lot better than the older agents. Sorry, older agents. They have a lot more experience, but I think the younger generation probably picks up on it a little bit quicker. There's the traditional ways that people have done it for years and years and years, the cold calling, the calling expired listings, the mailers, the things like that. But at the end of the day, with real estate, and like I talked about earlier, we really are, from my perspective and the way I run my business, is a relationship-based business.
Yep.
And so that just means dumping all of our resources back into our clients. I mean, pretty much everything that I do is based around the idea of how can I somehow in some way just provide a little bit more value to my clients, whether that's, for us, strategic gifting is a really, really important pillar of our business. Every time a client moves into a place, they know that they're getting something from us. It doesn't, even if it's something small, and it usually is, especially if it's a small rental transaction, but something acknowledging with a handwritten note saying, hey.
I remember the Class A bottle.
Yeah,
by the way,
yeah.
I don't forget.
He remembers. But, I want people to feel like, I don't want people to feel like they're getting, in our managing broker said this in our business planning class, like, don't make your clients feel like they're getting one night standed.
Right.
Don't make them feel like the transaction's done and you're gone.
Never going to hear from them. Yeah.
And most of the time, like, they want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. They would love for you to just call in and just be like, how's the place treating you? And they will use you again. But people, there's 20,000, don't quote me on this, but I think 20,000 real estate brokers in the Chicagoland area. Like, you come a dime a dozen. I believe it. Yeah, like not to be, and I recognize that. Like, if I'm not staying in touch with the people, they're going to go with whoever else is in front of them or whoever else they're building that relationship with. And so I take a lot of pride in that and making sure that we're really forging those relationships with our clients so that they know that we're in it for the long haul and that we're not looking to give them the metaphorical one night stand. So.
Love it. I want to end by asking you one final question, but I think you could probably relate to this as well. I'm really big on manifestation, really big on having a great belief in what your vision is and what you're building, and then having everything kind of form around that. What does the next 5 years look like for Michael? What does it look like for REKAP Group?
Yeah.
Ideally, where do you see yourself?
Yeah. So
I want it to be manifested here.
Yeah.
Filming right now.
Well, what's good for you is I write down all that stuff in my, in my journal, and I also have them on my mirror at home. So every morning I'm looking at all the things that I plan to do. So it's just getting boom, 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 always up there. I think over the course of the next 5 years, one of the goals for me is on the real estate investment side of things is I want to own 50 units. Lofty goal, but I know, and I've been around enough people that the scalability of that is, it's not, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 2 to 4, 4 to 6. It's
Yep.
compounds on itself. So that's probably the main goal I have for myself, is I want to have that exact amount of units would be, ideal or aiming for, but really kind of growing that side of things out. I want the REKAP Group. I don't necessarily have an exact expectation for how big I want it to be, but I want it to be functioning in a way that doesn't necessarily need as much of my purview over it. I'm spending so much time right now in our quote unquote off season, building out a functioning CRM, building out like pipelines and flows and things like that to create systems and processes in place so that, the REKAP Group, if Michael Kaplan is not there, is still a functioning business, and that the spigot doesn't turn off when I go and visit, my folks out in Florida for a week. And I can actually, turn off the phone versus now, I can go on vacation, but it's not really, it's the same.
You're still getting blown up.
I'm just same thing, just a different location, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but that's, I think that's what separates people who have a business that's running them versus them running a business.
100%.
And the last thing is just continuing, more on a personal level, but just continuing to make sure that there's always time set aside for personal relationships, whether that be, with a significant other or your family or your friends or a mix of all of them. Very easy. And I think for the first 2 to 3 years of starting this, it was really difficult for me to kind of balance that. And I really struggled with putting all of my time into my business. And I don't regret it, because I think it's part of the reason why I've been able to do what I've done and why we're in the position that we're in. But don't forget the people who helped you get where you are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Great way to end it. Well, Michael, I appreciate you
being
on Link Live. Appreciate you being here. Tell the camera, tell the people where they could find you, your handles.
Yeah.
Plug yourself.
So you can find me on Instagram at m.j.kaplan. I tried to get the original Michael Kaplan, but Michael Kaplan's about the most common name you can find around these parts of town. At REKAP Group is our team handle on Instagram. And kind of from those two places, you'll be able to find everything else. We're in the process of building out a website. But obviously those Instagram pages are where you're going to find most of our stuff and kind of delegate out to the different platforms. So
amazing.
Sweet.
Michael Kaplan. That's
it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Love it.
Good shit. Yeah, this was good. Really good. Appreciate it. Yeah.